I paced at the Leadville 100, really enjoyed it, and then, ran a marathon, which I said I would never do. Like, I was so against marathons, and I was just growing up running. It's not that I was against them, it's just I thought I never needed to run one. um, but ran a marathon, and I'm like, this isn't so bad, so I should probably sign up for a 50K now. And I ran my first 50K and loved it up until about mile 29 and a half, and then things got ugly.
That is Coree Woltering this week on the Do It For Yourself podcast. Hey people, how's it going? Welcome to the podcast. My name is Ian, and this is the Do It For Yourself podcast. And each week I have the opportunity to sit down with someone who is doing it for themselves. And if this is your first time here on the Do It For Yourself podcast, that means that this person is chasing a dream, a goal, an aspiration that they've had, and they are doing it solely because it is something that they have wanted to do. This could be business owners, it could be triathletes, it could be someone who is in a weight loss journey, and it is not in a way that is selfish. It is in a way that they have wanted to do this, and for one reason or another, someone has told them that they can't or they won't, and so they've decided to go on and do it, but they are doing it for themselves. They're not doing it for anyone else. They're not doing it to prove people wrong. They are simply doing it because it is something that they wanted to do. I hope that makes sense. So this week, my guest on the podcast is Coree Woltering, and I recorded this interview with Coree quite some time ago, and unfortunately I had some issues with the audio, so if it sounds a little bit weird, I have read a bunch of articles and done a bunch of editing, and I'm hoping that it turns out okay and it turns out tolerable in order to listen to. It sounds pretty good on my end, but anyway, it took me some time to get that all figured out because I'm still an amateur at this, and so that is why it took a little while for me to get this posted, but it is coming at a very convenient time because Coree just 2 days ago finished a 100-mile endurance run. Yes, you heard that correctly. It was a 100-mile run. And Coree finished 4th overall in a time of 22 hours and 20 minutes. Just let that sink in for a second. Coree was running for 22 hours and 20 minutes. Coree actually came from a running background, but in his early days in running, he was in the shorter distance. Maybe 5K was the most that he had done, and Coree actually was injured and began cycling and swimming in order to kind of rehab some of the injuries that he was going through, and was very successful over on the triathlon side of things. Ended up qualifying for the 70.3 World Championships, and then at some point Coree just decided that he was going to go all in on running and chase his passion and do it for himself on the running side. And he has done just that, completing multiple races from the 50K all the way up to the 100-mile distance, and just posting some absolutely amazing times. So I will not take any more away from Coree's story. I will let him tell the rest right now. I am joined here today by Coree, and he is a professional runner. He runs with Innovate and also Down to Run. And he's been running for quite some time now, but it hasn't been always the distances that he is into now. Coree has crushed many course records for 50Ks and 100 milers, but it hasn't always started that way. So we're going to dive into that. And Coree, I just want to say thank you so much for jumping on with me here today. I really appreciate it. And I'm really looking forward to diving into your story here.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
So in your early days of running, you ran through middle school and high school. And in those early days, you were running track and you were running some of the shorter distance races. So I believe your races of choice were ranging from the 200 meter to the 400 meter and the 800, correct?
Yes, definitely. Just the 200 was fun. I mean, who doesn't like to try to run fast? And when I was younger, I was decently good at it. So that was fun. The 400 has always been kind of the race that I've always loved. And then the 800 was just something that kind of carried over from just getting a little bit older and a little bit stronger.
And so in some of, those early races, it's funny because I always say it doesn't matter what the distance of the race is, it always hurts. So I bet you your 200 hurt probably just as much as your 400, just as much as your 800 sometimes.
Yeah, that is definitely true because, the 200 is just, it's all out for 200 meters. And especially like when I was in, say, 5th and 6th grade, I could run a good 200, but I wasn't quite strong enough to run, say, a great 400. So the 200 would hurt. The 400 would really hurt. But then it's like, as I got into high school and then into college, it's like the 200 would hurt, but it would only hurt because it is just so short compared to the 400 compared to the 800. So, just because something's short doesn't mean it's not going to be fast and hurt the same.
Yeah, absolutely. I joke with people all the time that a sprint triathlon hurts just as much as a half Ironman.
I fully agree with that.
So when you were in high school, were you doing 2-a-day practices only after school? What did your schedule look like while you were in high school?
Oh boy, high school. So I was one of those kids that I wanted to do everything, and I really just didn't want to say no. So in the fall, I was swimming for the YMCA. I was also playing soccer for the high school team. I was running cross country for the high school team, and I was a cheerleader. So, four sports in one season in high school, in the fall. Then in the winter, I would swim for the high school. I was also a cheerleader. And then in the spring, I was doing track and then swimming for the Y, finishing up the spring season.
So you had a lot going on.
Oh, yeah.
It wasn't just 2-a-day practices. You were probably going sometimes from practices to meets or meets to practices and here and there. I'm getting dizzy just thinking about it right now.
Yeah, and I'm sure my parents got very dizzy trying to figure out where I was supposed to be and when, but somehow we always got it done. But my first practice of the day was usually 5:30 or 6 a.m., and then I'd go to school all day, and then after school you'd start your first practice at 3:45, and then I'd be in practice until about 7:30 or so, and then go home, do homework, and go to bed.
Rinse and repeat.
Yep.
Yeah. So did you continue that way all through high school?
Yeah, I did that almost all 4 years of high school. And it was more just, my friends were swimmers, so I wanted to swim. I wasn't good at it. It was just something something to do. Not that I didn't have enough going on, but I mean, my friends were doing it, so I wanted to swim. And then track, I mean, I always enjoyed track. Cross country, yeah, I didn't necessarily enjoy cross country as much, but I was good at it from all of the running that we were doing in soccer.
And so during your senior year, did you start to focus on only one sport?
No. So during my senior year, well, I guess I did quit swimming,
Okay.
and I quit cheerleading. Those were the two that I quit just because, I mean, I couldn't do all the early mornings anymore. I really didn't want to have to do that and try to focus on just like figuring out where I was going to school, figuring out if I was going to play a sport or not, and all the other things that are going with it. And I mean, you just kind of want to enjoy high school at the same time. So I was playing soccer and running cross country in the fall. And then in the spring, I was just running track. But I got a concussion playing soccer my senior year, which was one of three or one of four that I had in high school. So then I had to stop playing soccer, and that kind of made it the decision that I was just going to focus on running then.
Okay, and so then as you were getting ready to go to college, did you have an eye on anywhere that you wanted to go for running, or were you more focused on your academics and you were just going to continue running to kind of stay in shape, so to speak?
I definitely had a few ideas of where I wanted to run in college, and then I also knew pretty much where I was going to run in college. It was more, I just didn't necessarily say have the times I needed to run at some of the schools I wanted to, or I would have been going there trying to walk on, and just with enough injuries and like the injuries from say even senior year, it definitely made more sense to go to Greenville College where I ended up going. And my mom, my aunt, and my uncle all went there, so that was kind of like the place they were pushing for anyway.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and so what you ended up running track there, and
Track
what?
and cross country, yeah.
Okay, so you're doing track and cross country both there. And was that D1, D2, D3? What division was that?
Yeah, Division 3. So it
Okay.
was a smaller school, only about 800 students.
Okay. And so while you were there, I want to hear about your career and what the differences were between running in high school versus now taking the next step and going to a college level and running at a D3 level.
Okay, sure. So probably one of the biggest jumps is just the amount of competition you're going to have, just at almost any given meet you're going to go to, because like in high school, I mean, I wasn't great at cross country. I never went to state for cross country. I went to state in seventh and eighth grade for the 4x200, the 4x400, the 400, the 800, and then the 800 in high school. But never in cross country. But in college, I almost became a better, I don't want to say a better cross country runner, but just the more competition and enjoying it and being able to do one sport during the fall compared to doing three other sports with it, made it easier to focus on that, I guess. But anyway, going back to a jump, just going to any meets, because we were in the Midwest region, I guess, for cross country. So we have, all of the Wisconsin schools are in our region, and then there's some good schools from Iowa and other good schools from Illinois. So, I mean, you go to your regional meet for cross country, even at the D3 level, and say North Central College, which I don't know if that means anything to you guys out in Pennsylvania, but they're the D3 national champions. So they show up to some of the meets you go to. The Wisconsin schools that are continually in the top 10 at nationals are at a lot of the same meets that we'd go to. So all of a sudden, it's like you're jumping from, say, a high school level to basically racing a lot of the same teams you'd race on a national level, and you're racing them like every 2 weeks.
And what was your increase in volume like as far as your training?
Sure. So in high school, I was running 25 to 30 miles a week, maybe, just because of all the other things I was doing. And I mean, that was almost the mileage that I could really just handle without getting injured. But then I thought that I wanted to be a good cross country runner. So it went from 25 to 30 miles a week to about 45 to 50, like starting out as a freshman in college, and worked up to 70 to anywhere from 70 to 85, maybe even 90 a couple of weeks going into my sophomore year. But then there are a lot of injuries that came with that. So then backed it off more to the 40 to 50 range, somewhere in there, and didn't really get injured as much. But I mean, just the jump at first was definitely way too big, but now that doesn't really seem like that many miles to me.
Yeah, I mean, now you're doing races in one day that were the equivalent to some of your weeks back then.
Oh yeah. Yep.
But do you think that the injuries were from such a big jump in such a short period of time, or do you think it was something with your form? Do you have no idea what was causing the injuries?
Yeah, so it was a mixture of a few things. Part of it was just the big increase of miles that I just wasn't physically able to handle. Part of it was just underfueling my body, just trying to be like the stereotypical like skinny cross country runner, and just not being able to recover enough because, I mean, where I was from, like, I thought all cross country runners are just skinny and like 5'7" and 110 pounds. Well, I'm not that. And so I wanted to be, but it just wasn't possible. And then it was also just, I would never take any downtime. So when you're increasing your mileage, not fueling enough, and then just not taking downtime, I mean, injuries are going to happen.
And when you were not fueling your body properly, that didn't lead into anything more serious. That was just a matter of you wanted to stay thin, and that was just that.
Well, so I had 5 stress fractures between my junior year of high school and my sophomore year of college, mainly just, eating disorders. So there is that going on as well.
Yeah, so you were trying to do what you thought was right as far as, trying to keep your weight down, because the lighter you are, the faster you can then be, and especially in cross country, the more agile and easier it's going to be to run on some of these cross country courses.
Well, that is what they want you to believe, that the lighter you are, the faster you can be. But I found out that is not true at all. Well, I mean, there's maybe a weight range that you can run your fastest, but I mean, I've run way better being heavier than I ever was.
Right. And I'm sure that some of that probably comes from muscle as well. But yeah, you thought that you were trying to do the right thing, and it was actually causing you harm, and I'm sure it was leading to more injuries.
Yep, definitely.
So in order to combat these injuries, you kind of went back to your roots with some swimming, and then you also started doing some cycling.
Yes.
And this was around what year while you were in college?
My sophomore year of college is going into second semester of sophomore year was when I really started to do more swimming and cycling, just because, our cross-country coach had finished an Ironman or maybe 2 Ironman. I don't remember if it was 1 or 2, but I know he did Vineman out in California. So that is how I knew about like, oh well, even if you can't run, maybe you could do some cycling, because I mean I was never like a big cyclist or anything, but swimming I'm like I can definitely do that. So just swimming, cycling, and ellipticaling during the coming back from stress fractures.
And when did it kind of come onto your radar that you were thinking about doing a triathlon?
Can't remember if it was going into my sophomore year, no, going into the summer of sophomore year or summer of junior year. Um, so actually, I think it was summer of sophomore year, because we had like the regional championships were only like an hour from my house for, I think, Olympic distance. So I said, yeah, why not? Like, I'm already going to be swimming, I'm going to be biking, so maybe I'll sign up and try to race them. And I honestly don't remember if that was the year I raced it or if it was a year later that I actually raced them. But that's when I really started thinking about it, like, well, if I'm going to be injured or if I'm going to be dealing with injuries, then maybe I should start doing some of this.
And that was an Olympic distance at that time?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
And for your cross country distance, when you were running cross country, what was your distance in that?
8,000 meters. So Division 3 runs 8,000 meters compared to Division 1 that runs, well, I guess they probably run 8K during the year, but then they race 10,000 meters at nationals.
Okay. And how did you go from this short distance racing in the 800s and now you're in racing 8,000s? I mean, what did that transition look like?
It wasn't pretty. Yeah. The first time, so my first college cross country race was a 6,000 meter race. And I was like, well, how do we actually pace this? How do we race it? And they just said, well, run it like a 5K, but then just hold on for an extra 1,000 meters. And at the time, I'm like, a 5K, like, that's a really long distance to even be trying to race. And so I don't remember what I ran in my first one, but it was not great. And that's when I'm like, well, maybe I will actually learn to like this longer distance stuff. Maybe. And then as we got into the season, we were running 8Ks and stuff. I mean, my shorter distance stuff was still way stronger in terms of like if you'd compare the times. But towards the end of my freshman year, I did finally start to be able to put together a decent 8K. And then like my sophomore year, I was running really well, but then had the stress fracture. But then my junior year of college, I had a very good season of cross country, I think. And then my senior year of college, I had a very good season of cross country. But I mean, it still wasn't crazy fast or anything. But it was like I didn't hate the distance.
And what was your kind of reasoning to go from such a shorter distance to such a longer distance?
Well, I guess I just kind of figured out with triathlon stuff. This is all kind of jumbled together, but it's like once I figured out that was decent in triathlon stuff, then running, say, 8K for cross country didn't necessarily feel so bad. But the great part about it was I could still train to run for, say, 800 meters to a mile, but then I could still run a good 10K off the bike in an Olympic distance. But I could never figure out cross country, just standalone 8K, just couldn't do it. And I mean, even today, I still don't think I'm very good at that distance. But I don't know.
So it was kind of like you were running these 10Ks off the bike and you're like, well, that's not really that bad. And, I can still do the 800 and the 800 is going to help my 10K off the bike, but it's also going to help my 8K. So it kind of just all meshed together, and that's where you ended up.
Yeah, and so I mean, it's a really weird transition, but I mean, my college coach is like, hey, if you want to race triathlon stuff and it's not going to injure you and it's not going to take away from your season, then you can race some. Why not? And so that's kind of how I decided this isn't so bad.
Yeah, and so when you got into triathlon, you had a relatively short time in triathlon, but also a very successful one at that. You ended up qualifying and racing for nationals at the Olympic distance.
Yep.
And then you also qualified for the 70.3 half Ironman World Championships.
Yeah, twice, 2013 and 2014.
So I want to hear your comparison of racing nationals and the competition at nationals to the competition that you were seeing when you would go to some of these track meets, because you did say that the competition was very high there. Was it a similar kind of environment?
Yeah, so say nationals for the triathlon, and I don't know, I'll just use a random, just any, not any cross country meet, but most. I mean, when you're running cross country in college, you'll see whether it's a D3 team, a D2 team, or even a Division One team, like you all race on the same course. And it's kind of like the same thing as at nationals, that if you can get a qualifier for nationals, sometimes you will have some people that were just a little bit slower or newer that were getting into the sport or just starting out or whatever. And you'll have anyone from that to somebody that, you know, they may only be a year away from making an Olympic team that could show up for nationals in the triathlon stuff. So that's kind of cool, how you can really see the different stages of both groups competing, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And you think the competition level at the higher end, which is I'm sure where you were, do you feel like the competition up there was about the same? It was just as competitive, I guess I should ask.
Sure, because I mean, at the front end of, say, nationals for the triathlon, you're going to have some of these people that were also Division One, Two, or Three swimmers, or runners, or maybe even some cyclists and stuff that are dabbling in other sports. And so it was just it's kind of cool, because I mean, you'd even see some of the people that you ran against in college, and then it's like, oh, it was their senior year, so now they want to go up and do nationals, and then here they are racing, 3 months later. And one of the cool things is, like, USATF has the collegiate recruitment program. So if you are a swimmer and you can run a certain time for, I think it's the 5K maybe, or if you are a runner that has run a certain time in the 5K or the 10K and can swim a certain time for 800 meters in the water, then they will help you out, and they will kind of get you set up with like a elite development program coach and stuff like that.
Oh, wow. I never ran. I didn't do anything in college as far as sports go until my senior year when I got into triathlon. So I had no idea that even existed, but it does explain why there's so many competitive triathletes that now show up to nationals.
Yeah, for sure.
So how did you do in nationals?
I think I don't know, one of the years I had let me think. Not great, not bad. I mean, I was 205 for the Olympic distance. And I mean, honestly, though, I think that got me like 25th in my age group or something like that at nationals.
Yeah.
And it was just funny because even though I swam when I was younger, I never had a good open water swim. So I think I ended up swimming like 28 minutes for the 1500, but then was able to bike like a 101 or a 102, and then ran, I think, 33 minutes for the 10K off the bike.
Wow.
And so I didn't have the swim to be super competitive at the shorter stuff.
Yeah. And so then that led into your half Ironman stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
it was New Orleans that you qualified one year, right?
Yeah, that was the second time I qualified. So the first year I qualified was Branson, Missouri.
Okay.
Um, and the wonderful thing about Branson is everybody's just kind of like in the fog for the swim. So, I mean, you can't really tell where you're going. And so swim times are never super fast at Branson, but as long as other people had a little bit slower of a swim time, it would help me out.
Uh-huh.
And then on the bike, it's just so hilly in Branson that a lot of people just really toast their legs on the bike. And then the half Ironman run is pancake flat. So for me, I had a okay swim, had an okay bike, but then I ran 119 for the half to just run through the age group and get the spot to Worlds there. Um, the second time I qualified was New Orleans, and uh, that was that was not a great day.
It was
That
it was pretty ugly, wasn't it? Like, didn't you end up in the med tent?
I did. I ended up in the med tent with an IV bag and a half afterward. Um, I had an okay swim. I had an okay bike, but I dropped one of my water bottles on the course. And I mean, normally it wouldn't be too bad, but I mean, New Orleans got up to be like 80 something degrees. So on the run course, I ended up walking quite a bit of it, and it was pretty slow for me anyway. And I honestly don't know how I still made it second in my age group. Um, but I just remember I was supposed to be driving back to Illinois that day after the race from New Orleans, which is a bad plan to begin with anyway. But I had to stay overnight again because, I mean, they wouldn't let me out of the med tent.
Wow. Yeah, I remember seeing your post about that on Instagram, and I think that the picture that you put up was not one of your. It didn't look like it was your best moment post
No.
race, and so but I didn't realize that you actually ended up having to stay another day, and it was at that. I mean, it was that bad.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, you're having success in triathlon. And from what I could tell, through social media and Instagram and everything, you were enjoying competing in triathlon.
Mm-hmm.
But uh, did you feel like you had a void that you were still trying to fill?
No. So I actually really enjoyed triathlon. And I mean, the half Ironman, I just felt like this is my thing, like I really, really enjoyed it. And I was looking forward to just trying to get better at the swim and continue to work on the bike and then just slowly improve the run. And so I actually moved to Boulder, Colorado, thinking that I could hopefully sometime potentially make it, become a professional triathlete. Um, and then I got mono about 6 weeks after moving to Boulder.
And I mean, mono is brutal. I had it as well when I was much, much younger though. I was in like the fourth or fifth grade, I want to say.
Yep.
And I mean, it's just such a brutal, brutal sickness. And I think the worst part about it, aside from being so absolutely exhausted, and I don't know if it was the same for you, but for me, they didn't have any idea what was going on. Like they had no clue. like I wasn't showing, I wasn't like running a fever, and it was nothing crazy like that, but I was just so exhausted and so out of it, and like didn't really want to eat anything. And it took them forever to figure out what was going on.
Exactly. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
oh God. I honestly I would not wish mono on my worst enemy. It's not fun at all.
I fully agree. Because the first time I really started to have signs of it was at the end of August, beginning of September, going into Worlds of 2015. Yeah, 2015. Maybe it's 2014. I have to think. Whatever year they're in Mont Tremblant. Same year as New Orleans. Like everything is starting to get jumbled in my head. But anyway, August was the start of it when one day I just woke up and I'm like, not really feeling that good. Like, couldn't tell what was wrong, but no big deal. But I got out on the bike that day and I'm like, I just don't want to ride my bike. Like, okay, whatever. So I didn't ride that day and still went to work and everything, and then came home and it was fine, and then just kind of went on like that for a week. And I'm like, this seems really weird, but I had Worlds for the half Ironman coming up, so I had to just pull it together and do something. So anyway, I raced at Worlds, and then the day after, I just woke up in my bed and I'm like, something is really not right, but didn't know what to do. So went to the doctor and just nothing, no big deal. Like, you're fine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's
Really?
that's kind of how it was for me too. And it's like, no, something is wrong, and like you
Yeah.
have to kind of keep like pushing forward. And then I ended up getting blood work done, and that's how they figured it out.
Yep. Well, exactly. Because then I went on to race my first marathon 3 weeks after Worlds. I wasn't feeling great, but I ran my first one. And then I had to take like 10 days off of training because I was just completely drained. But then I woke up and I'm like, finally, like I'm starting to feel decently better. And there's this 50K that I had really been wanting to do. So I ran the 50K, and that just wrecked me. And then I ended up in the ER on Thanksgiving morning. And sure enough, it was mono.
So let's unpack what you just said there a little bit, because you went from a guy who was doing the 200, anywhere from the 200 to the 400 to the 800 while you were in middle school, high school.
Mm-hmm.
And then you go up to like the mile and some longer distance, like cross country stuff. Okay. So then you get into half Ironman, which I can totally see, because I think the Olympic distance was probably great for you, but your strength is the run. And so the more time that you have to chase people down on the run, the better that's going to be for you.
Yes.
So the half iron distance makes a lot of sense. But you went from half iron to now you're like, you know what? I'm going to give marathon a try. But this is coming from a guy who hated cross country and hated distance. So how did that even happen?
Yeah. So the time of moving to Colorado was just very interesting, I guess, because that was the last year I also raced Worlds for the half Ironman. But before Worlds, when I couldn't figure out what was wrong, I just thought that I was like, I'm getting burnt out or something, which in my head, it didn't really make sense because I really enjoyed training. But I'm like, I don't know, this just isn't working. So one of my friends was running the Leadville 100 and asked if I'd like to pace a section of the Leadville 100. So I said, okay, why not? Like, I had no trail running experience before, but said, sure, I'll do it. So when I got to Leadville to pace for him, all of a sudden I'm like, oh, this trail running thing is really kind of cool. And at that time, I didn't really know there were shorter trail runs and stay, I don't know, 50K, 50 miles, 100 miles. So I actually told my coach at the time that I was going to race Worlds and then be done with triathlon for the next year so I could explore trail running a little bit. And then I'd come back to triathlon. But it just didn't seem to really work out like that because I paced at the Leadville 100, really enjoyed it, and then, well, ran a marathon, which I said I would never do. Like, I was so against marathons, and I was just growing up running. It's not that I was against them, it's just I thought I never needed to run one. But ran a marathon, and I'm like, this isn't so bad, so I should probably sign up for a 50K now. And I ran my first 50K and loved it up until about mile 29 and a half, and then things got ugly.
So for those who are listening that are unaware of what the Leadville 100 entails and what that race is, can you just give just a brief description of it?
Yeah, so the Leadville 100 is a 100-mile trail race starting in Leadville, Colorado, and it goes out to Winfield, and then it turns around and heads back into Leadville. And the lowest point on the course is like 9,800 feet above sea level, and the highest point is, I don't know, 12 something. I don't remember. But people love this race for some reason. I mean, I really like it too. I haven't run it yet, but I like it. And so, yeah, I mean, you get a little bit of everything when you're running in Leadville. You get all of the altitude, you get sun, you can have some heat, you can have snow going over Hope Pass, you can have just about anything happen while you're up there.
That is absolutely, I mean, I had a friend who just did the Leadville 100 mountain bike race this past year, and I couldn't wrap my head around that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, after seeing some of the pictures and everything that he posted, I'm kind of like, could I do that? Like, I don't know. And so, but I mean, I can't fathom running 100 miles. I can't.
Yeah.
And you have intentions to race Leadville?
I would like to run Leadville at some point in the next couple of years. That's another one of those crazy things. I was signed up for it in 2015 and then had surgery. So I actually didn't get to run it that year. But I don't know that I will run it anytime soon. But I need to stop saying I will never run it anytime soon, because the more I say that, the more I end up racing those things that I say I will never do.
Yeah, that's quite evident with the marathon and everything else.
Mm-hmm.
So you paced for Leadville, and that's when you started to get into some of this distance running. And you had it in your head that you were going to go back to triathlon. And I remember when you posted the picture saying that, you were going to take time to focus on running. And just from an outsider looking in, I was very surprised as well, given the success that you had in triathlon. But was there like a thinking process when you went through that? Did you really stop and kind of take a step back, or was it something that once you did Leadville, that switch flipped and you knew, this is what I'm going to focus on?
Sure. So Leadville is kind of like the starting. Leadville is the starting point of me saying, I think I'm going to focus a little bit on running. And then it basically just one of those things where the more I just got out onto trails and ran on trails rather than the road, the more I started to really like it. And like my whole intention was basically I wanted to excuse me, when I took the year off, I wanted to focus on trail running and mountain biking just to even work on like bike handling skills, just build strength on the bike, just do some fun things. So that way, when I came back for, say, the half Ironman, I'd be a better bike handler, I'd be stronger. And the run, I mean, I don't know that my run would have been that much stronger, but it it would have been fine. And so I don't know, just like the more I was out on the trails, and then I just really enjoyed trail running and some of the longer runs, and I don't know, just it kind of didn't make sense to go back to triathlon, I guess.
And so you started to fall in love with this. And from my perspective, looking at your 2017 season, 2017 was a very, very good year for you. You had many PRs, many course records. What are just some of the highlights from 2017 for you?
Sure. Well, I'd actually like to include 2016 in that because honestly, I mean, I ran 2:26 for the marathon at Chicago in 2016. Actually, I ran 2:28 in February and then ran 2:26 in October of 2016 on two totally different marathon courses, but they're just so different and so fun that it was just great to see all of the work paying off. But then, I mean, some of the bigger races like the Tunnel Hill 50 miler, where I ran the second fastest 50-mile time of 2016, was just kind of like, whoa, okay, I really did make a good decision leaving triathlon for now and just coming to running and trail racing and I don't know, I mean, the trails will take you to some pretty awesome places. So, like, I got to run in the Columbia River Gorge in Oregon, got to race all over California, and just, I don't know, there's some really cool places out there, and I really enjoy that.
And that, just to touch on your 2016, the 50K time, that was the second fastest 50K time in North America, not just like, you know,
Yeah,
in the state.
Yeah.
I mean, that's absolutely incredible.
So, I mean, that was fun, but I mean, that's coming from a kid that a year and a half before it was doing triathlon stuff, you know? Like, I mean, I was not a wonderful marathoner before that either. I was okay, but nothing great. And so, in 2016, I mean, you saw my marathon come down from 2:37 to 2:26. And then to go on to run that 50-mile time, I really felt like that was just like kind of a validating moment of, okay.
I made the right decision, and this is right for me, and this is where I should be.
Yep.
And I mean, it's not just coming from, you know, this is also coming from a kid who hated distance running when he first started running. So
yeah,
I mean, I think that's, I don't know, ironic, funny. Yeah, I don't know what the word is for that.
Well, just, it's very cool also how, you know, when I started running in, say, fifth grade, well, it was fifth grade, you don't have to be the same runner you were in fifth grade as you are when you're 15 or 25. And just then, I don't know, did I just like running shorter stuff because I was good at it then? Like, I don't know, maybe I would have been a better mile 3K, 5K dude in college if I would have put in more running time earlier on and stuff like that. But I'm very happy that I didn't, because, I don't know, maybe I wouldn't even be running now.
Yeah, I've talked about that on the last couple podcast interviews that there's so many people who go all in from so early on, and by the time they get through college, they're just burned out and they don't want anything to do with it. I mean, I have friends who swam all the way through college and they have not been in a pool since their last swim meet, their senior year of college.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that's tough, but they've found something else now at this point, but it's so crazy to me to have something that, was such a huge part of your life, and now you don't want anything to do with it.
Totally. I mean, because like when I stopped doing, say, triathlon, like I did not say I was done forever. I just said I was done for a year, which a year has turned into much longer. And I mean, even if I decide someday that I don't like running anymore, I mean, that just probably means I'm going back to triathlon. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, who knows?
And the other thing that I think you said was interesting is that you don't have to be the same runner all throughout your running career. And I think that you can tie that into life in general as well. Like the person that you were in 5th grade shouldn't be the person that you are in 8th grade, and so on and so forth. You should always be, growing and evolving and changing. So that course, I think just kind of speaks to, and I don't want to, put words in your mouth and speak for you, but I think that it kind of speaks to maybe your outlook on life, that you always want to be changing and growing and adapting.
For sure. Yeah, I totally agree with that.
So any other highlights that you want to touch on from 2017?
Oh boy, I don't know. I mean, in 2017, well, I finished my first 100-mile race in 2017, so I feel like that's probably one of my bigger highlights of the year. Well, and finished my first 100K and 100-mile race, and they were only 20 or 21 days apart. So, I mean, I was pretty happy with that. Just because, once again, for someone that said I never wanted to race a marathon, and then it's like, well, okay, maybe a marathon is fine. And then, well, okay, 50K is fine. Well, okay, I'll do 50 miles. And then, 100K, 100 miles? Okay, why not? And people ask me, like, why did you sign up for your first 100-mile? And I just said, well, I just wanted to know how it felt.
And how did it feel?
The first the first 40 miles or so didn't feel awful. Miles about 40 to 75 were not my favorite, and then miles 75 to the finish, like, I enjoyed myself. So it was the Dunes 100, and it's run in the sand dunes of Florida. So, I mean, it's hot, there's sand, and there are sand dunes. So nothing is actually that flat or fast or covered. So as a race in February, coming from Illinois, where, it's not really that warm, and going down there, and it was 84 degrees, heat index of 103 or whatever, I could have picked an easier race, I think.
Oh, wow. And I'm sure you probably had the full gamut of emotions in that day.
Oh yeah.
And how long did it take you to do that?
21 hours and 57 minutes.
And what is your fueling strategy like for that? I mean, I know I guess it's different for running than it is for triathlon, because you can get outside assistance in running, whereas you can't in triathlon. But how do you have enough fuel, and what did your fuel look like for that race?
Yeah. So at this race, the aid stations were, I think, anywhere from 3 to 6 miles apart or so. So uh, I went into this one not fully um, prepared for what I was going to face like midday, only because I didn't really know how my stomach was going to react to it being that warm midday. Um, and I didn't know if I'd still be doing solid food or if I'd be doing liquid or gels or what. So for me, anyway, I like to do liquid calories. I'm very big on them. At the time, I was using gels, um, and gels just don't really work for me like midday when it's hot. Um, so anyway, I mean, I was going for shooting for 200 to 250 calories an hour, and it started out with like V Fuel gel and like an electrolyte tab and um, can't think of what else I was using at that point. But about halfway through, I realized like this isn't going to work. So it went to peanut butter and jelly sandwich, boiled potatoes with salt, and ramen noodles with chicken broth for the last half of the race.
And so how did they have that at the aid stations, or did you have like,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah,
okay.
so they had that at the aid stations there. But like normally, say if you're not, well, I guess aid stations and trail races are very weird and wonderful. I mean, they're going to have pretty much anything you would need, I would say. But like I had never used chicken broth and ramen noodles before. I had never used peanut butter and jelly, and I had never really even needed the potatoes before. But because they had them at the aid stations, and I just realized like, hey, I really need to get solid foods in. They're like, well, you should try this, and it worked.
And was it for you? Was it kind of damage control at that point? Because for me, my first half Ironman, I also used all liquid nutrition, which I still use all liquid nutrition. I don't have any, problems with it, or anything against all liquid nutrition. It works very well for me. But I have found, and I've learned this along the way, is that when I get to the run, I need to chew on something. So usually when I go through the aid station, I'll grab a banana, or I'll grab a Cliff Bar, or I'll grab something. But the first race that I ever did, it kind of went into like damage control. And I was just like, okay, I want this, and I want this, and I want this. So was it similar for you?
Yeah, very much so. Because I mean, I can still do pretty much at the shorter distances anyway. I can do a lot of just like all liquid nutrition, be fine. But at that one, like I just needed. I definitely needed more calories than I was taking in. And I realized, oh, well, if I'm going to try to make it up with, all this liquid, then that's just not really going to work for me either. So I had to go for solid food, and it worked great.
Yeah. And so is there any other highlights from 2017? I mean, I know it was a big year for you.
Oh boy, I don't know. I mean, I don't know.
What was your as far as your course records go, what was your favorite course record from 2017?
Um, hmm. Well, my favorite from 2017. I'm actually going to have to probably go back to 2016 to pick out my favorite, which, as I had mentioned earlier, it was Tunnel Hill, the 50 miler, because the previous year I had ran 6 hours and 18 minutes at the Tunnel Hill 50 mile to win it, and that was the course record. But then in 2016, I ran 5 hours and 30 minutes. And that was the new course record, and that's kind of the big race that got me noticed, I guess.
And that's the race that got you noticed for some of the sponsors that you're working with now, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So your sponsors are Innovate, Down
Hmm.
to Run.
Yep.
Am I missing anybody else?
So I'm also sponsored by Darn Tough Vermont, the sock company.
Okay.
And then there are others that still kind of working on a little bit. Um, and then the newest one, well, the newest is Safety Skin, which is a reflective skin spread. So, like when you're using it in like low light conditions or raining or um, just like anything like that. It's really cool because it just goes straight onto the skin and then it will stay on. And when cars see or whatever, like it reflects to them, then it wipes off with a baby wipe.
Yeah, I've seen you posting a couple of pictures of that, and it looks like you just kind of take it and you put it on your legs and you can put it on your arms, and it acts as a reflector, and it just kind of, I'm sure it really pops out. From what I can see in the pictures, it looks like it's really great. That's a pretty cool concept.
Totally. And so, I mean, they're awesome. And I mean, you can never be too safe when you're on the road. So, I mean, it's um, much better to be out there and be seen, like there are just too many crazy accidents that happen. And then squirrel's nut butter is an anti-chafing salve that you put on, and it's not only does that, but it's also a healing salve. So, like if for some reason something would chafe, you can put it on, and it will help protect you there. And there's VCA Energy Bar, which they've just kind of been with me since my triathlon days, and they're pretty cool.
And speaking of the squirrel's nut butter, and the whole purpose of the squirrel's nut butter, I don't think I really need to get into that too far. But I would have to imagine that you use that quite a bit as your attire for when you like to race. Is not that of the norm, shall I say?
Yeah.
So we really can't have this conversation without quickly diving into that. I'm just going to let you take the floor on that. So why don't you share with everyone what your typical race day attire is and the why behind it?
Sure. So basically, anymore, I'm racing in a crop top, tank top, and a Speedo. Um, and it's, I don't know. I mean, the crop top, it was just something to do. Well, I first started that when I was down in Florida for a down to run race, actually. And it was going to be hot. And so I'm like, well, this jersey is too long. Like, I need to cut this off. So got the hotel scissors and went down and cut the jersey, and there I went. But what I
That
didn't,
that part makes sense. I mean, there's guys that race triathlon. One in particular, I don't know if you saw it going around, but the guy actually races in a sports bra because he has to have so much of his top covered, but running in even a running like singlet was still too much for him, and he always ran shirtless. So that part makes sense. We'll get into the rest of it though, I'm sure.
yeah. But then a Speedo. Like I race in a Speedo. I mean, I always have been, even since triathlon days. So I mean, why quit?
so
But
so was that like from a swimming background? Like you
no,
raced?
'cause
Go ahead.
no, our swim team didn't even, our swim team, I think we were in jammers actually rather than a Speedo. But um, so it's also kind of funny. One day, I was in Florida, and once again, same race where I'm like, I could wear running shorts, but it might be really hot. And someone's like, well, don't you have a Speedo? And I'm like, yeah, I have. And they said, well, wear that. I said, okay. So I wore it, and the next thing you know, like, I'm the dude that runs in a crop top and a Speedo. And if I ever don't race in the crop top and Speedo, then people are like, oh, did you forget it at home?
So it's kind of like your thing now.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I just can't even imagine uh, riding a bike in a Speedo, let alone for 56 miles.
Yeah.
And so speaking of some of your sponsors, I'm sure that they have offered you a tremendous amount of support throughout all of this.
Mm-hmm.
But the last thing that I want to get into with you is your support system outside of your sponsors.
Yeah.
So
So,
who's in your corner, and how do they support you, and what is it like having that support system?
yeah. So I got married to my husband, Tom, about a year and a half ago. And I mean, he's been great for everything. I mean, well, he's like the crew chief of trail racing and, well, any racing, not even just trail, any racing. So, I mean, you'll probably see him at an aid station someday and he'll be there handing me this and handing me that and switching this out and switching that out and getting things ready to go. But he's also takes a lot of like pictures for social media stuff and keeps people updated on race day because I mean I can't do it while I'm racing. But he comes with me to all of the races and yeah, and so that's pretty awesome. And I mean, a lot of my family members are still in our hometown area, so I mean, it's very nice to see them as well.
And what's it like having that support system with you? Like, do you think that you could do this without having them?
It would definitely make it a lot harder. I mean, there are certain races where I've just gone to just because it's been close to home and he could be off at work or something. So, I mean, there are certain races I've gone to where I'm just like, well, I can self crew myself today, you know, where all I really would have to do is like fill up a water bottle or something like that. But it's so much easier when you have someone there that's actually handing you things or helping you switch things out and this and that compared to having to use like a drop bag at an aid station. So like if you don't have someone that's helping you crew, you have to actually like go find your bag at an aid station and get things out of it and this and that. But we just have the system down where he knows, like, okay, this is what he needs going to this aid station. This is what he needs going here. So, like, when I run by, I'm just dropping things at him and grabbing things from him.
Yeah,
So,
that's I'm sure it's awesome having that support as far as on the course, but also like the emotional support off the course to go and chase these dreams and goals that you have.
for sure. Because, I mean, you know, on course, like, if you're having a good day, it's great to see somebody you know, and it's like, oh, this is someone I know. Like, it's good to see this person. But, same thing. If you're having a bad day, it's also like, oh, okay, well, he can say, what's wrong? Like, what's this and this and whatever. And he's also, like, picked up on just certain, like, small body cues and stuff where if I'm, like, not happy about something, he can just kind of figure out what it is. So, because, like, sometimes when I'm racing, I can become very like nonverbal and just not want to talk. But I mean, nobody else would be able to figure it out. And then also, you know, just like after a race, like if it's a good race, it's great to have somebody to celebrate with. And if it's not a good race, it's good to have someone to figure out why things didn't go great.
Yeah, or to even kind of take your mind off of it for a couple hours after the race, and then that way you can go back to it with a clear head and really examine it instead of kind of getting down about not having the day that you wanted to have.
Yes, definitely. And then, I mean, I also have my coach, David, out of California. And I mean, everything is online and that stuff. But I mean, just a very solid coach and a group of people. And so, I mean, it's definitely started to change my outlook on racing and stuff. Whereas maybe 2 years ago or so, I was like, I want everything to be results driven. And now I'm more just, I want to enjoy the process of training and racing because at the end of the day, it is just running.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We get to do this.
Yeah.
That's I mean, it's something that a guy who runs a lot of races out here in the Jersey area says, and it's something that another one of my guests said the other day, and it's so true. We get to do this, so I think that this is a good spot to wrap it up. I really appreciate you giving me the time here and sharing some of your successes, and how you got into doing some of these absolutely insane things that you have accomplished. And I would like for you to please let people know where they can follow along for your 2018 journey, because I know I am personally very excited to watch that from afar.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you for having me. I mean, if you want to follow along, just Corey Woltering on Instagram. And I did start a new blog the other day, I think. Well, I don't think. I know I did. But I don't know. I used to be like Corey Woltering at blogspot.com, but now it's at wordpress.com, I think, or I don't know.
Well, if you want to send me the link, I can drop the link into the show notes of this episode
Awesome.
that go
Yeah.
up onto iTunes and everything. So all you have to do, like I said, is just shoot that link over to me, and I'd be happy to put that in there for you. And for those of you who are not going to go into the show notes, it's Corey spells his first name Coree.
Yes.
So when you're looking him up on Instagram, it's under Coree Woltering. So Corey, thank you so much for jumping on with me. And I look forward to hopefully having another conversation after some of the things that you have going on in 2018.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for having me.
All right, man. Well, take care, and I'll talk to you soon.
All right.
So, my friends, how did that one land in your earbuds? For me personally, I still cannot quite wrap my mind around running a 100-mile race, let alone a 50K race. I personally have only done one full marathon, and I still say to this day that that was one of the hardest things that I have ever completed. Even up against some of the triathlons, some of the 70.3s, I still think running for that amount of time was definitely one of the hardest things that I've done. So my hat goes off to Corey and some of the things that he has accomplished in his very young and early running career. And I can only imagine what's to come for Corey in this sport. So I just want to say thank you again to Corey for coming on and sharing some of his stories and his journey here on the Do It For Yourself podcast. And I would also like to thank you, the listeners, for coming and hanging out with Corey and I for a little bit this week and sharing your time with us. If you are interested in supporting me, supporting this show, the first thing, and quite possibly one of the most helpful things that you can do, is just take a minute and leave a 5-star review on the Apple Podcast app or whatever app that you use for listening to these podcasts. I would greatly appreciate that. And also, if you could, share this podcast with a friend, family member, coworker, whoever it is, that may be interested in getting some motivation and some inspiration on their journey, whatever that journey may be. And the last place that you could go and support the show is over on Patreon. I do have it set up, and you are more than welcome to jump into the Patreon group and make a donation on the Patreon group if you would like to support the work that I'm doing here on the Do It For Yourself podcast. But until next week, I hope that you have an amazing week here. If you are down in the Carolinas or anywhere that is in the path of Hurricane Florence, I just wish you nothing but safety during this time. I know that it is probably very nerve-wracking and very scary, so I wish you all the best, and I look forward to seeing and talking with all of you next week.